Welcome to the Pop Cult Podcast. Here are your hosts, Ariana and Seth.
I'm Seth,
I'm Ariana.
and this is the Pop Cult Podcast. Better late than never edition. We normally record on weekends. If you're hearing this and you're not a regular listener, you probably didn't even notice. But I have been having some sort of really coffee, not the drink, but the ailment, something. I took a COVID test, so I know it's not COVID. I think it's just change of season crud. It's
Yeah.
probably a good way to describe it. Here in the Netherlands, we had it got dropped real cold, then it went up into the 70s Fahrenheit, then back to cold again. And this is over the course of maybe like a week or a week and a half.
Yeah.
And for me, I know it always like messes with my sinuses, those
Yeah,
like
and I think
transitions.
because we don't live in a temperature controlled like apartment, it fucks us up even more.
Because when it changes, we feel the change.
Yeah.
But we are here. You may hear me cough a little bit on this podcast. I apologize, but what am I supposed to do?
The show must go on.
Oh, and if you're a regular listener, you're lucky. You'll get an episode here on a Thursday and another episode on Sunday. So that's
I'm
like,
sure people are really chomping to the bit.
it reminded me of back on NBC when they'd be like, hey, a new episode of Seinfeld on like Tuesday out of nowhere. And you're like, yay! And it's probably because some show that they had started that season was a total bomb and they canceled it and they had to fill that with something. But yeah, we're talking today a little later about the newest installment in the VHS anthology franchise, VHS Beyond. But first, we're going to be talking about an indie film that I had noticed had gotten some buzz lately, called Strange Darling. Nothing is what it seems when a twisted one-night stand spirals into a serial killer's vicious murder spree. This is a film that's told out of sequence. It's structured into 6 chapters, but we start with chapter 3 and we kind of jump around. I figured out maybe a third of the way in that, I think I figured out what the conceit is.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is they're hiding the chapters from us that would make it clear what was going on. It is written and directed by J.T. Mulliner, who I am not familiar with. He got his start and continues to work a lot in the haunted house industry, like making haunted house attractions.
Okay, interesting.
And so I saw an interview where he said, that taught him a lot about anticipation, intention, things like that, which you kind of have to structure that house. Like you don't want to give them the scariest thing the minute they walk in the door. You want to build to something. It came out in August and started to pick up buzz. And then I think once it came to digital on demand, that's where it really became a movie a lot of people saw. The fellas over at Red Letter Media had talked about it. And
say it like we're coworkers.
Yeah, my friends over at Red Letter Media, Mike and Jay, shout out to Rich, we're talking about it, and that kind of got me interested. Going in, I thought this probably isn't going to be a movie that I'm going to be too thrilled about. And I will say it was certainly like a 3.5 star kind of movie, but it was enjoyable while we were watching it.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like I'm ever going to revisit it.
No, it's one of those movies that say if you are introducing horror to someone or someone who is interested in this film and you find out things that they like that this film may carry, you might end up rewatching it for their sake and appreciating at least how well the shots were done and how much they did with as little as it feels like they do have.
Well, and it was actually shot on film, which they weirdly announced at the beginning with a title card that says shot on 35 millimeter.
Yes.
And even more interestingly, I found out the cinematographer of the film is Giovanni Ribisi. Now, my wife doesn't know names and faces at all. She cannot.
I know faces.
You can't match them.
No, not with their names.
So I went, oh, the cinematography was done by Giovanni Ribisi. Blank stare. And I went, Google it. Well, Giovanni Ribisi is a name that you maybe can't phonetically spell. And I think she typed something in and was like, nah. So I cut and pasted the name, sent it to her on WhatsApp. She found the image and was like, oh, yeah. And that's a conversation. That conversation is one that happens in our household on a regular basis, but I think it reveals more about my autism than it does you.
Yeah.
Because I think most people would not remember. We'll be watching movies and I'll make comments about like, she reminds me of a young Jessica Walters. And you're right, like Jessica Walters, I'm like the mom from Arrested Development. Yeah. Or
It's getting worse
because I'm getting
considering
older actors, so
I
I'm
think
like,
it's also because we've like dipped into movies from like the 40s and 50s.
yeah,
Those names have stuck to you, so you've been like,
like, she's a 21st century Monica Vitti. So this film came from a single image that JT Mulliner had in his head. I think it was like 20 years ago.
Okay.
And it was a woman emerging from the woods running in this red jumpsuit.
Okay.
And that's all he knew. And so that's the opening shot of the movie. And so I think we almost watched the movie maybe in the way that he kind of wrote the story, essentially, of building up these elements, fleshing out these characters, and then discovering for himself what was really going on in the story.
Yeah.
What did you think of the choice to tell the story in a non-linear structure?
I mean, it's obviously influenced or could have said that like
Pulp Fiction. Yeah.
Tarantino. Which is fine. I think it makes sense if you're trying to build this anticipation of what the story is going to be and throw people off their course, you change it up. I did appreciate at the least like how they would the titles, right? The titles would come in with the numbers to let you know what it was that you were watching versus being thrown in and getting confused.
Let's talk about 500 Days of Summer, which will be reviewed on an upcoming episode of our patron exclusive Love at First Laugh. So keep an ear open for that one over on the patron page.
Ooh, ear open like that one.
That was made me uncomfortable.
That makes it sound like you can't take a compliment from your own wife.
I don't like that. Well, I was thinking like the way you reacted made it sound like a sexual thing, and I'm like,
Ew.
keep your ear wide open.
I didn't mean it that way. You've got some weird fucking quirks there.
There's no quirks. There's no quirks.
Not to yuck your yum.
Oh God. Listener, you need to abolish that phrase from your vocabulary. If you're someone who says that, I'm not even going to say it out loud myself because I hate it. It is one of the most disgusting millennial phrases that exists. I would rather hear people bring back harsher mellow at this point than listen to that bullshit. Anyway, we were watching 500 Days of Summer for that podcast, and it is also a story told out of order.
Yes.
But not and it constantly is showing you, X number day. And so it's like a count that will either go up or down, forwards or backwards. There were scenes where I had no idea where in the story the relationship was in 500 Days of Summer.
No, this one was more like
I was about to say this one, I knew exactly where we were in the story. It was 6 chapters rather than 500 possible days.
Yes.
And so it made it, and I think by choosing that simplicity, it kept the runtime down. The film is only an hour and 36 minutes, which I'm like, sweet spot. That is the sweet spot for a movie. Especially this kind of a movie. And I don't think it was that clever. Like I said, a third of the way into the movie, I figured out what was going on, and then it just became me sitting there. But I think even the movie kind of realized it couldn't keep you on the hook till the end. So around the halfway mark, that's when it kind of shows its hand.
Yeah, and I think it relies a lot on the actors staying in those characters while we're being diverted all around, where you're kind of like, you at the least get to this understanding of who has the upper hand, why is it that they have the upper hand, or you're going, ooh, they fucked up in this part. They revealed themselves in this part, and how it connects throughout the story.
Well, one thing I liked that Molnar said in the interview I read was he tried, and I think he was successful in this, they were never tricking the audience. Every scene was honest. It was just you saw them out of order. So The magic trick was the presentation, not the storytelling.
Yeah.
They never did any fake outs. They never had a character do something to make you think they were one way and then went, aha, you idiot, later.
Yeah.
And then it was always, when you think back on what happened, everybody was authentic and true to their characters from point A to point B. For like, if we watch this in a linear structure, it would still work as a movie.
Yeah.
And you'd never feel like you were being duped.
Mm-hmm.
The secret would just be revealed earlier.
Yeah.
Which around the same point, right? Because like it's chapter 3 is where we open, which is the exact middle of the story.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if we go in linear order, I do think chapter 2, that is where the movie shows its hand and you know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
So it would come slightly earlier
Mm-hmm.
in the film. So the two main performances in the film are Willa Fitzgerald, who I didn't know much about, and Kyle Gallner, who were kind of in the Gallner-sance,
Yeah.
as we can call it. Once again, my friends over at Red Letter Media. Mike and Jay, close personal family friends.
Dear. We're expecting to send them
Rich
some
was at my
Christmas
wedding.
gifts.
I mean,
Yeah.
so Kyle Gallner has been in several movies lately. You're probably like, who the fuck is Kyle Gallner? You've seen him. He was in Smile. He played the police officer love interest.
Yes.
And he reprises that role, I think, in Smile too. I remember him from a long time ago, 23 years ago. I remember that boy when he was a boy. Wet Hot American Summer, the film that was made by a bunch of people from MTV's The State. And there was a little boy who was threatening to tell on Paul Rudd for making out with Elizabeth Banks.
Yeah.
And that little boy was Kyle Gallner. I feel like there was some guy who, this is like a boomer thing for sure.
Yeah.
There was some guy who hosted a radio show and he would tell these stories. And at the end, he'd go, and that little boy was Richard Milhouse Nixon. I'm sure, like, if we have, I don't think, based on the demographics, I don't think we have any boomers that listen to this.
No.
They don't know how to find it. And so, yeah, it was a child actor. I want to say maybe he had a tiny role in The Sixth Sense as like a kid that was given Haley Joel Osment shit. But I can't remember that one for sure. But I do think he played like bullies or dicks as a kid.
Yeah,
that was kind of his thing. And so we have Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner as our two leads. Interestingly enough, their characters never get actual names.
No.
The credits list them as the Lady and the Demon, which is interesting. And those names are only one of those names is actually used in the film, to my knowledge. What did you think of Willa Fitzgerald's performance?
I thought that they both showed really good chemistry between the vast differences of those chapters.
The first half of the story chronologically,
Yeah.
they have, you like believe it.
Yeah, it's sort of like at first you're kind of like, okay, she must have always been afraid of him, to the chemistry of maybe they were like lovers. It was
a hookup.
Yeah, it was a hookup, and like it all felt genuine on both parts.
Yeah. I think she has the bigger change.
Yes.
I think he's more consistent from beginning to end, chronologically and in the way the movie's presented. But she's the one who has a turn.
Yeah.
And she's also, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but there's just some interesting things that happen with her character that and situations she's put into that I thought it was very interesting the way she would kind of switch on a dime.
I did like the fact that it didn't feel like she was overacting. It just felt like more as a person who
in a crisis,
but it's also sort of like kind of exhausted themselves, being like, I don't want to do this. You don't want to do this, but I have to fucking get through to this. So just please do what I ask you to.
Well, the goal is to like live till tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that is going to be a very hard task based on the things that are happening in the movie. Drawing a blank here. I think there was a lot of deconstruction of film tropes in this. The opening of the film, beyond having the title card telling us it's shot in 35 millimeter, also gives us some lore,
Yeah.
telling us that between, it was like 2018 and 2020 in this specific area of the country, I think it's like the Midwest, that there was a serial killer on the loose, and that in 2020 they were apprehended. And that we're about to watch that story. It reminded me of a film that I think is better. It also came out this year, in a violent nature, which was the IFC film that deconstructed the Friday the 13th tropes.
Yeah.
Which is a film that has like people who love it, people who hate it. I feel like I kind of fall in the middle towards loving it a little more. But I think that was paring things down more than this movie. A lot of Strange Darling is fairly traditional, I guess is the word I'm making of, or just kind of, it is kind of what you would expect in a movie like this.
It's a mix of traditional while also going into a twist of a modern take.
But it's like, I mean, is the modern take the spoiler? Because I don't think that's much of a modern take anymore. I think I anticipated that because it's starting to go from being like a modern take to becoming a trope where we subvert expectations, right?
think it's, to me, it also had to do more with how it was acted out. At the least,
What do you mean the performances, or you mean the structure?
Because like normally when you get to that twist, that is when the person goes unhinged, full almost Jokerish kind of personality, versus this was more just like fucking god damn it, like
It's a compulsion that's become an annoying habit.
yes.
Yeah, I can see that. The film has a surprise, I guess it'd be a surprise because I wasn't expecting them in this movie, appearance by Ed Begley Jr. and Barbara Hershey.
I wonder, like, how do you get Ed Bed? Like, is he just easy to contact? Is he?
Well, I think it's a one-day shoot,
Yeah.
and if you know maybe like Ed Begley's kids, because they seem to be active
On social media,
but also probably in the industry too.
Yeah, I think they've also talked about how sometimes their dad will go out to watch a movie and then forget that he's in the movie.
And be like, oh yeah, I was in this movie.
So his friends are like, you didn't warn us. And he was like, oh, I just forgot.
I mean, the man's been in a lot of movies. And even their characters subvert expectations.
Yeah.
That I thought was clever. The main subversion, I kind of saw that coming a mile away. This told me that JT Moliner does have a little sharp sense of humor there.
Yeah.
Because we're introduced to Ed Begley and Barbara Hershey at the end of chapter 3. So we see them at the beginning of the movie. And it's not until later we come back and we see what happened to them. And then we go back to chapter 4, the middle, or not the middle. But then we get a fill-in that gives us some more of them. What did you think of because you think they're one kind of person, and then they reveal that they're hippies.
Yeah.
And all the weird little quirks and things going on there. What did you think of that?
I think it was kind of refreshing versus it just gonna be like they're gonna be these hicks that are like gonna end up being, oh, they're the murderous ones. Like we thought that, like that trope of doing like the old people, just the old people are like the old people are the worst.
It's kind of like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre trope where there's obviously Leatherface, but then you run across this kindly old man in that region and you're like, please. And he's like, oh, I'll take you in. It turns out that's Leatherface's uncle or something.
Yeah.
But no, they are who they say they are.
Yeah.
And I think they're pretty funny.
Yeah, they play it very well. So I think it's the fact that we don't see a drastic character switch, which can be kind of annoying, where you have like sunshiny people suddenly becoming like dangerous and deadly. They're just who they are. They're like the same characters throughout. They're just shocked that they're like that they've been embedded in this and thought that they were just gonna have a regular day.
And like what was interesting is the cast is so small.
Oh yeah, it is a very small cast.
And it really, I mean, I would say the first few chapters of the story are just Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner.
Yeah.
And
it's only until they have the expansion of the cast that you do realize that this is an indie film because you have actors that don't really know how to deliver certain lines
There was
or
one
just
actress that
just
was stood out as
yes.
cardboard.
And it felt as if I was watching a sci-fi channel made like movie. The way that she was acting, which was really bad because it's just like she's going against Willa Fitzgerald, and you're almost like, wow, Willa Fitzgerald is she deserves a goddamn Oscar because she's just like delivering seamlessly in this one. What is happening? I don't think you should do that. And you're just
When it should be like utter terror.
yes.
Giovanni Ribisi, normally known for acting, and I'm assuming he's probably done cinematography on some other projects. This is the first time I'm aware that he did that. I found his cinematography very good for a
Yeah.
movie that had a low budget and was kind of trafficking in some familiar tropes. The thing that stood out about the movie, I think, was the way it looked. The color correction was incredible. A lot of primary colors reminded me of the British series Utopia a little bit.
Yes, so I bumped into an interview
Oh, you
where,
bumped into Giovanni?
yeah, in the corner store.
I think I was over at the Red Letter Media.
So I read this interview briefly about him. He apparently when he has always wanted to do the cinematography for a bit. He was kind of joking me like he thinks it's kind of like boring that an actor then becomes a director. But he's like, I can't say that I won't fall into that trope after doing this.
But I do think it's refreshing because you do see so many actors go to directing when there's lots of other areas of filmmaking.
And he explained on how there's this whole argument that digital is cheaper than film, but he's like film can be as cost effective, even like better than going to digital, and that he just feels like he wants to prove that you don't have to go to digital to make an indie film.
Well, because now I think I think traditional film cameras are probably becoming cheaper if they're not being sold as antiques.
Yeah.
Uh, I just wonder about film stock, what the pricing on that is. I've never shot a film, but I've always heard that film stock can run pricier. So maybe he also produced the film, so I wouldn't be surprised. He has connections in Hollywood. He's a Scientologist. That he was able to get like a really good deal on like bulk 35 millimeter.
Scientologist because it just makes sense.
He was raised in the church, so it may be a Beck situation because his sister Marissa Ribisi was at least at one time married to Beck.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're still married or not. And so I could see that working, but I also see like a good digital camera is expensive.
Yeah.
If you shoot on an iPhone, like Sean Baker did it for Tangerine and he pulled it off, but he's Sean Baker and he was able to get these like incredible lenses and things. But if, yeah, you're shooting on just a standard digital device, it is hard to upscale that and make it look good.
Yeah.
Film just kind of looks good right as soon as it's developed and it can be improved. But yeah, I really appreciated that decision because I think if the film had not been as visually rich, it probably would have been kind of boring to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm really pulled in now by movies that have those kinds of visuals because it communicates to me that the people making the movie really give a shit about what they're doing because they want it to look really good.
Yeah.
They want to be proud of what they're presenting.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell when you watch some like sloppy Netflix, Hulu original movie and like the color grading's not good. And especially when there's like dark scenes and it's like not saturated correctly, like the white balance is off. And so it does make a big difference to see something shot on film. Now, the director, Molnar, he had said that he wanted to explore far more than just horror tropes.
Yeah.
And he mentioned things like tenderness, love, and gender. Do you think those were touched upon in this movie effectively?
I think they were. There were a few shots that I know for sure, like the TikTok and Tumblr girlies that are into some really fucked up, rough sex shit would probably
Rough trade, as they say.
like have gift or like have sectioned off.
That's in their private collection.
But like the introduction, like later on, of how these two characters are like in a car talking to each other, sharing a first kiss, her jokingly being like, "Oh, thank God, like that we have some chemistry." There is some sweetness there, right? And when you watch it, especially considering the first scene that we watched, you're kind of surprised of this like tenderness that's going through because it's just going to end in utter like
Hell,
havoc
it's just
and
yeah.
hell. Um, where it like if you were to present that to me and then been like, oh, this is the rest of the film, I would have been utterly confused as to what I was watching.
So JT Molnar already has his next project lined up,
Mhm.
and this is a big Hollywood movie.
Okay.
He is going to be directing a film adaptation of Stephen King's The Long Walk. Now, you don't know about The Long Walk, do you?
No, I do not.
I just was
I
it.
don't know much.
Well, I'm an autistic, and I know a lot about a lot of things that aren't important at all, that haven't served to help me in survival at all my entire life.
Apocalypse happens and you're like,
Mm,
dear God, make
I can
some-"
name a bunch of Stephen King books I've never read and tell you what they're about.
You just become a storyteller for some dude.
I've thought that in the apocalypse, hey, I'll be your tribal storyteller. I got you. And I can remember all kinds of movie plots. No, if we get to Mad Max, I'm just gonna kill myself. I'm not doing that shit. I'm not gonna work for Humongous or anything. So what was I talking about?
He has the new movie
The,
out,
the
The
Long
Long
Walk.
Walk.
So The Long Walk was an early Stephen King novel, and I'm not sure. I think it was under his name, or it might have been under the pseudonym he used.
Okay.
And the premise is it's set in the near future, and it's this televised competition where people are walking on foot
Okay.
from point A to point B, and whoever lives wins like this massive cash prize.
Okay.
So people at home are watching people drop dead along the way, and I think there's like supposed to be, it's one of those where you take that idea and then you build on it. So like, okay, well, there's a culture of people that like follow them.
Yeah.
And then there's a culture of like vendors that are selling things along the side of the road.
Yeah.
And so it becomes this like, it's sort of a world gone mad kind of thing.
Yeah.
I thought immediately of They Shoot Horses, Don't They?
Mhm.
Which has got to be one of the most bleakest films I've ever
Well,
seen.
it remind me of a like a to be a Eat Butler, like Perils of the Soul, like when at the
Parable of
beginning.
the Sower?
Yeah, like the first two books when they're like talking about walking from one
No,
place
but
to
this
the
is
next.
like, this
This
is
is
more
a
like The
telepath.
Running Man or
It's
something.
like someone like grabbed it and was like, "Hey, Hunger Games."
Yeah.
Like,
And so he's going to be directing that.
okay.
I'm hoping Kyle Gallner's got a role in there. Keep that Gallner sans going.
Yeah.
What do you think of this director? We don't know if Giovanni Ribisi is going to be cinematographer. I don't know. Will it be shot on film? Probably not. I think like if Warner Brothers is producing, it's going to be digital.
Yeah.
What do we think of this? Because I've noticed when directors who do indie work that I haven't been like blown away by, but I've enjoyed, then get picked up by a studio to do a big movie. It's always disappointing. I'm talking like the the co-directors of Captain Marvel, who directed a film with Ryan Reynolds and Ben Mendelsohn that was an early A24 movie about gambling addicts.
Oh yeah, didn't they do like Placement 12 or something like that?
No, that was the Daniel something Cretton. He directed Short Term 12, and then he directed Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
And then we have like, yeah, and so like it just feels that these directors, when they get these gigs, I'm sure the paycheck is
Or
great.
like the woman that did No Man's Land. No Man, like and then she also did another film.
The Eternals.
Yeah, ended up doing The Eternals.
Yeah, but she's a kind of a anti-communist, anti-China kind of person. So I'm like, fuck her. She can just do Marvel movies. I don't care.
But I think it's also like this thing, like you saw her do like these incredible films about
Well, I mean,
real
yeah,
life.
the writer I still think is a
And
great.
it's
Yeah.
only for when they go to Marvel, they're given something, and there's like all their personality is gone.
So while he's not going to like Disney, uh, he is going to. I'm gonna look at it right here. We got some cast. David Johnson, who played the android in Alien Romulus. Philip Seymour Hoffman's son,
Cooper.
Mark Hamill.
Eh.
Ugh. He's probably going to be like a host.
Yeah.
Judy Greer. I like Judy Greer. Charlie Plummer, who I really loved him in Lean on Pete. That was a really sad movie that I liked.
Lean on Pete.
Oh, so it's Lionsgate Film is doing it. I mean, it has potential. But I do think when you see a director like this who has a very like clear style and vision and you give them the big picture,
Yeah.
I worry that studios are going to come in and go, no, 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 we're not doing that. No, 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 we're not doing that. And then it just becomes a bland corporate product
Yeah.
rather than like, then don't hire this person. Hire some journeyman filmmaker that doesn't do anything outside the box, and then you can just dictate to them what you want.
I think it's just more of a sad thing because it makes you wonder, like, do these directors, did they enjoy the process or did they, because it just seems like even some of them, like that guy that ended up directing like the Fantastic Four, like he just stopped doing movies.
Well, he was kind of a dick.
He sounded like a dick.
I mean, he hadn't made a movie that I thought was good anyway.
But
So.
it's just, it makes you
Josh Trank.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, what was the process? Did you enjoy the process before, and what happened then? Because, like,
the one takeaway I've seen from directors like that is what they learn from making those movies is how to handle like a larger budget. Think of Denis Villeneuve. That's a director who has transitioned from small movies to big movies, and so far he's doing good.
Yeah, I mean, I was oddly enough thinking about him when I was thinking about how about directors that are able, like, his mark is so clear on those films, right?
His thing is scale. He's really playing with the idea of scale. So with JT Molnar, one of the things you could tell from Strange Darling is that he likes to play with expectations.
Yeah.
So for The Long Walk, I'll be interested to see how does he play with the audience expectations of what we think is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, would you recommend that our audience track down Strange Darlings and watch it?
Go look for it, watch it.
I think if you like serial killer stuff.
Yeah, it's one that the least, like, if you're one of those people that's kind of like me, that like serial killer stuff interests you, but you're at the point of your life that, hey, watching a docu-series or watching a movie based on it kind of gives you the ick now because they kind of disregard all the victims, and go watch something fictionalized like Strange Darling.
I think it's got the perfect runtime for like a Friday night movie.
It's got also like a very interesting soundtrack that has to relate to the movie, so it has a different feel once you start getting into it.
Six blood-curdling tapes unleash horror in a sci-fi inspired hellscape, pushing the boundaries of fear and suspense. This is the latest entry in the VHS series, VHS Beyond. It's the 7th movie. I think I've watched the first 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of stopped after that because they weren't that good.
Nope.
I heard a lot of positive buzz about this one. And I think there are some strong points in it. You, Ariana, are not necessarily a fan of horror anthologies.
No, like the past few viewings of the horror stuff, I realized, like, I don't like gore.
Oh, because we watched Saw 3.
Yeah. And it was like to the point that I just would have to like stare away for a bit because it was just.
Was there something else? Because I remember we were watching something, you were like, when will this be over?
It was that, and then like we were watching bits of like
it was this
horror too.
Yeah. But it's because you have these 5 different, or actually it's the 9th. I don't understand because on Wikipedia it says the 7th installment and 9th overall in the VHS franchise. I don't know what the fuck that means.
Me neither.
Aren't the installment and overall, those are the same thing. Whatever. So there are a couple directors of note here. Justin Long directed one of these short films.
Okay.
Kate Siegel, the wife of Mike Flanagan, directed one, and he wrote it.
Okay.
I'm going to see if you can guess which one Justin Long did. So I'll remind you what they were.
Okay.
Stork, about the Special Police Task Force and the house full of ghouls.
Okay.
Giant Bird.
All right.
You don't remember it all.
No.
Dreamgirl, which was the Bollywood movie
Yeah, I really don't think that was probably his. Like,
No.
because no.
Live and Let Dive, which was the skydiving one.
Okay.
Fur Babies, which was the woman who keeps all the dogs.
Yeah.
And Stowaway, which was the one with Alana Pierce in it.
I don't think it was Stowaway, and I feel like Stowaway was like the best one,
Okay.
at least in my
Okay.
opinion.
So which one do you think Justin Long directed?
He's a millennial, so I'm gonna go Fur Babies.
Yeah, which is even weirder. Do you know why that's weird that he directed that?
Why?
Can you recount the plot of Tusk to me?
Oh, yeah.
It's like the same goddamn
Yeah, it
movie.
is. Like the fact that my memory, like, okay, there's like
When I was watching that short film, I kept going, huh, they just ripped off Tusk.
yeah, I kept thinking it was like because for a second, like I blanked out about Fur Babies, right? And then
It was
slowly,
Tusk and then Misery. They ripped off both of those things.
when you were like Tusk, it was like suddenly my brain just like
Your mind palace, the doors flung open, and like it was like Neo, the bookshelf, the shelves of weapons flying past.
what I didn't want.
I'm the Neo. I'm the no, you're Neo and I'm Morpheus. Morpheus. Um, so that was Justin Long's,
Great.
which feels very derivative.
Did he like even did he write it too? Like
I don't believe so. Let me look here at the writing.
like
No, he wrote it too.
oh,
Yeah, he wrote it. He
so
wrote it and directed it. Yeah.
He probably like called
Kevin Smith and was like, "Can I just rip off Tusk?"
and he's like, yeah, whatever.
Which is weird because it's like if you're gonna rip off a movie you've been in, we all know what movie you should rip
I
off.
think it's
Barbarian.
the thing is like no, like here's the thing. I don't hear people, maybe I should search it out, that were like Tusk.
There are people that love Tusk. If you go to Letterboxd, there's 5-star reviews. Now, there's not a lot of them. That's the minority. But there are people that are like, Tusk is my favorite horror movie. And I want to go, oh, so you've only ever seen one horror movie. You should probably watch more. That will become your favorite then. And there's a sequel in the works. Kevin Smith's going to be making Tusk 2. Where you go next? I mean, you turn someone into an elephant? Because I was thinking other animals with tusks. So yeah, and we're going to talk about each of these movies. Now, which film do you think was directed by Kate Siegel, written by Mike Flanagan?
The last one.
Exactly right.
Yeah, because it felt like
people who knew how to make a movie.
yes.
Uh, so this entire anthology is structured with a frame narrative that made sense to me a little bit at first, and then the further we got into the movie, I kept trying to figure out why this is the framing narrative because it did not align with the shorts we were watching. The frame narrative is a documentary about alien encounters, and I saw that it was directed by Jay Cheel, who is a Canadian documentary filmmaker. And I thought that was very clever because it feels like a real documentary.
Yeah.
The way the interviewees speak, just the way it's edited and put together. I thought, oh wow, this is the first time I've seen like a mockumentary in a long time that you could probably get people to believe was a real documentary if you showed it to them separately.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was clever. And I thought because of that, oh, and the title VHS Beyond, the poster has this very like nebula kind of look to it. Oh, they're going to do like horror sci-fi, right? So it's going to be like horror aliens, right? No. We get films like Dreamgirl, which is about like a robot.
Yeah.
And we get Fur Babies, which is about just a crazy woman.
Yeah, because like the robot, I can maybe excuse it if it was like later on you told me, oh, aliens made that robot. Okay, fine.
Or it was built using like alien technology taken off a crashed UFO
yeah,
or something.
but like the Fur Babies,
It felt so out of place.
Yeah, I don't understand how you could be like that's aliens unless someone saw the dogs and went, those are alien dogs.
So I think like the thing that I saw was they kept going, oh, it's science fiction. And so I'm guess what she's doing in Fur Babies is science fiction. It feels more like body horror to me, which is kind of sci-fi, but I always feel body horror is kind of its own thing.
Yeah.
So got to keep the throat hydrated, pop in another cough drop. We'll just talk about each of the films in the order that they're presented. So Stork, when I was describing it, I was looking at your face and I kind of got a blank. Not a uncommon experience in this household. So I'll just give you a little recap. There's a string of baby disappearances. A police unit dubbed Warden gathers late at night after having found out the location of the missing infants, as someone followed the guy who took one.
Oh, is this the one that like later on they revealed the babies were like not really babies? They felt like really gross
Well,
things.
it was, I don't really know what was going on, but I kind of like that about it
Okay.
because it takes advantage of the first person thing in a really fun way. Uh, just think of like the chainsaw camera that we
Yeah.
were getting at some points. I mean, that was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So it's a film that like is tongue in cheek. It's not taking itself that seriously, especially when you see the monster reveal at the end. It's such a silly looking monster. But it leaves a lot of questions that I like. It really genuinely reminded me of like a horror short story where it's more about the writer having these images and this premise and wanting to just kind of play that out without feeling the need to have a ton of exposition that's going to explain every last detail of what's going on here.
Yeah.
It's an insane situation.
Mhm.
Uh, the acting is very over the top, but I get the sense that's what was wanted.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, do you remember much about this?
No.
Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Uh, I found it to be a great start. It kicked things
Yeah.
off in a fun way where I was like, okay, I'm in. We got a VHS anthology. Let's go. Next one, Dream Girl. This is uh this paparazzi is given a tip to get footage of the latest Bollywood sensation Tara. Um, and the main character, it's a mob who's the paparazzi. He had dreams of being famous himself and is kind of jealous. And so by being a paparazzi hound, it's kind of like he's getting revenge against the people who got
Yeah.
famous. And so he ends up hiding in the closet of the Tara's trailer, and that's where like the big reveal happens, and then it just descends into like bloody chaos.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if this I think it was Live and Let Dive was where you turned to me and you were like, how much more of this movie is there? Um, what did you think of Dream Girl? Do you remember
I
Dream
mean,
Girl?
yeah, I remember Dream Girl. It was just silly. It was there's always that concern when you see something that is Bollywood related in something that is such like American centric.
What was directed by Virat Paul, so I'm assuming
Yeah.
a
So
person of
like
Indian descent.
so you're just like there's like that sigh of relief when it's like it's a person of Indian descent, but it's also just it felt very chaotic.
Yeah.
It felt as if
But
like
think about what you've seen of Bollywood movies. They're
yeah,
chaotic.
yeah, yeah. I think it was just also I didn't know if I was supposed to have like empathy towards Tara for the way that she was represented. So when she is shifted to the robot, I'm not like, oh man, what was that?
I
It's
was more like, kill that thing.
yeah, it's more just
But
like
once again, because it's a short film that's part of an anthology, you don't really get strong character development.
no.
So it is one of those where it's like playing a one-shot tabletop RPG. You don't care if the character lives or dies because you're not going to be playing as them again. It's more like, hey, let's have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Um, th I don't know if this speaks to sort of the uh societal racism in me, but I just cannot get into like Indian cinema. And I've watched a few things. There's a few directors, but I realized, oh, they're more kind of have Western things about them. Mira Nair, who I
Hmm.
believe directed Monsoon Wedding, which I remember seeing in the theater back in the early 2000s, and I really thought that was a good movie. I don't know if I'd still like it. Um, and I can never pronounce this gentleman's name correctly. Satyajit Ray,
Hmm.
who I would really want to watch more of his movies because he was a big influence on Wes Anderson. But then, like, I know there's a lot of people who love this RRR movie that came out a couple years ago that was just, and they were like, oh, it's just so fucking crazy. And like, but that just isn't what appeals to me about movies. I don't sit down to watch a movie to just, that's what I want when I sit down in a theme park ride.
Yeah.
And the reason is because it's short. It's like 10 minutes, and you just get this burst of craziness, and then it's over. I just don't find the idea of sitting watching like a 2 hour movie that has this kind of tempo and energy to be. It's the same reason why I don't like watching Marvel movies or most Hollywood stuff. Is it's
It's
so
not stimulating. It's just
it's not about humans. It's just about like
it's tropes.
tropes. And there are people that love that, but that is just not the cinema for me. I
Yeah.
just don't enjoy it. Anything else you want to say about Dreamgirl?
No.
Okay, good. Moving on. Moving on to the one that Ariana turned to me and said, "When is this over?" Live and Let Dive. Zach celebrating his 30th birthday party with his wife and a bunch of friends. Skydiving trip goes wrong. They glimpse a UFO outside of the plane. The UFO collides with the plane,
Yeah.
and they all crash. Some of the people survive, only to realize that some of the aliens on board the UFO survived and are like hunting them down and killing them.
Yeah.
My biggest question with this was, why are they hunting them down and killing them? I didn't understand why they were doing that.
Which is weird because it's sort of like when you think about like Predator. They're just like we're trying to fight like the most vicious like if you think you're a predator, we're the predator kind of thing. There's just some people who went skydiving.
Well, and it's also
like,
they're
oh,
not even the
fuck.
people that like were after them, because we
No.
see like fighter jets, US military fighter jets that are sent after this UFO, and the aliens themselves, while they have an interesting character design that I found was like, oh, I've never really seen that character design. They do also have the physical characteristics of Greys,
Yeah.
which are those kind of close encounters of the third kind of alien, which are not necessarily portrayed as bestial as these
Yeah.
things are. I thought the ability that these aliens have was kind of interesting, where it's like their head opens up and there's this laser built into their brain.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
thought that as a concept and a visual, I was like, huh, that's like an interesting thing. But once again, because it's a short film, it's going to throw a lot of things at the wall, and it's not really going to take a lot of time to develop them.
Mhm.
So you've got to make the rest of the stuff really interesting. And again, much like a theme park ride, this was very fast paced, very overstimulating. And I would guess because it's a short film, it's more tolerable than if it had been a feature.
Yeah.
What did you think of Live and Let Dive?
It just there's a lot of gore in it that I just did not. It just made me want to tune out. There just like is a moment where somebody like realizes, oh, they're safe. They go out for looking for a friend, and the friend's like head has been
Cut off the body,
cut
yeah.
off the body, and it's just like
And does that have to do with the Palestinian genocide and how
yeah.
on social media we're becoming much more aware and seeing images of, true gore and violence?
Yeah, so it's just like it just was one that like I just did not enjoy.
Okay, okay. Um, but yeah, my biggest problem with that was I just didn't understand why the aliens were doing what they were doing, other than to make a gory, violent short film,
Yeah.
which I would assume those aliens were not aware that they were in a short film. Uh, we come to your favorite. Sorry, I said it was Live and Let Dive, but Fur Babies. Now, it was written and directed by Christian Long and Justin Long. I don't know who Christian Long is. I'm gonna assume brother.
Yeah, maybe his
I don't
brother.
think he's old enough to have like a son
No,
who's old
no.
enough. And it would be Christina, I guess, if it was a wife or sister.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the Longs made this one. The Long brothers, the new Coen brothers. They're gonna remake Raising Arizona. So we have Becky runs a supposed dog daycare center called Doggy Dream House, which starts out as an ad. Wasn't that how it began? Like a TV ad?
It starts off like this PETA group that's coming
No. It
in.
starts off with the
Yeah.
in-universe ad.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah.
watching her ad.
Yes.
Which that was weird because the ad wasn't presented as found footage. It looked like just the feed of the ad. And then
Yeah.
the camera kind of cut, and now we're watching the PETA group watching the ad.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so they want to go in. And she keeps taxidermies of her past dogs. That's one
Yeah.
of the things that they see. And that upsets them. So they send two of their members along with a dog to find out what's going on. And they have cameras, which
Yeah,
is
they're pretending to be a couple.
Yeah. Which I think I mentioned that VHS Beyond is all found footage.
Yeah.
Which the documentary thing isn't really found footage. Or at the end, it incorporates some found footage.
Yeah.
So what did you think about where Fur Babies went and the tone?
It was just Tusk, and it wasn't fun or interesting. It was also one of like you have to be like you have to go into like complete like
Suspension of disbelief.
because it's just sort of like you see the human turn into a dog. I don't know in what fucking world would I go, that's a dog.
It is
That's a dog.
it is also a very human centipede.
Yes. And it's gruesome, and then like again, I realize I'm not a fan of like gore. And it's just
And this has some pretty, I'd say it has some pretty nasty gore in it.
and it's just kind of it's dumb at the end when you think about it because it's like, oh, these people who have been turned into creatures are suddenly going to act like these creatures because, we've removed all of their human abilities,
Well,
like their features.
I think the implication was that, the way she was treating them, she was like conditioning them.
Yeah.
But I feel like the conditioning would take a lot longer because
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not gonna bend to that kind of conditioning that fast.
Well, especially because it's like then the main like the major guy and like the whole Peter like S group, he keeps calling, being like, I sent two of my representatives down there. If you don't do blah blah blah, like I'm going to like have the police investigate, yada yada yada. Like at then he ends up going himself, and then like ends up like injured or killed, and it's just like it's one that is just like it was the weakest of all of them. Like, even though I wasn't a fan of Dream Girl, this one was weak. It was just dumb.
Well, it just felt very derivative. It was
Yeah.
doing a lot of things I've seen done better, and I mean, I guess it's done better in Tusk.
Yeah.
Because at least I understand why it's happening in Tusk.
And in Tusk, the reason that they kind of give it is because it's like, oh, this is the best way that he can probably live his life. But it's like, why won't you just let him die?
Well, and then you have Michael Parks, who plays like the antagonist in Tusk,
Yeah.
and I think he is a very good actor.
Well, I think it's also the mix of it being like Justin Long's character in Tusk is supposed to be a dislikable character to begin with. It's almost like you want him to go suffer through this because it turns out he's not kind. He's not
Yeah, and
nice.
it's like people who are concerned with the treatment of animals, like I don't think they're bad people. Maybe they're a little overzealous, but that's a good thing to want to do is to treat animals
Yeah,
well.
it was like the stupidest reasons that they were gonna go over to her house was because she had taxidermied like versions of her past animals.
Yeah, I forgot. It was the hook was very weak.
Yeah, it was very weak, and it's like one of those things that you're kind of like, I feel as if they would go like they're not gonna target like a woman like a woman who lives by herself who has a small business. I feel like they would be going for something a little bit bigger than that.
Okay. The Stowaway, which was directed by Kate Siegel, written by Mike Flanagan. Haley, played by Alana Pierce, who we know as someone that was a collaborator on the now defunct Funhouse YouTube channel. Video gaming streamer. I think she works in the video game industry now to some extent.
Yeah.
And always fun. Like I love the people on Funhouse, and she was always a fun person. The only actor, I think, in this short film.
Yeah.
It's implied that she has left her husband and child behind. She is obsessed with documenting extraterrestrial encounters in the Mojave Desert. I think she does interview a few people, but it's really her. She's it. And one night she witnesses something fall from the sky, goes to investigate. It's a spaceship. She enters, and then weird, crazy shit starts to happen. The thing that I liked about this was that they really committed to the aesthetic because it is a very staticky camera. I'm sure that's like digital filters that were put on the film after the fact, but it does feel authentic in that way.
Yes.
I thought the cinematography was clever, especially with some of the reveals in the last few moments of the movie. You see just enough that it doesn't look cheesy. It looks terrifying. And then the central idea I thought was really clever.
Mhm.
um of because you think it's going to be okay, just a woman, she's looking for aliens, but now she has come into a situation in which she's like fucked herself.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Stowaway. Any thoughts or observations you have?
I thought it was a at the least, like, knowing the actress that was portraying and the way that she's delivering everything because she's a reporter, I thought it was way smart to get her because we've seen her beyond just doing like playthroughs is delivering news about
Oh,
games. So it was one where it was sort of like within the perfect wheelhouse that she could deliver it on point. Um, I love that part where when we do discover she has a child, she's like, "Oh, I realized I have filmed over something that should be deemed important, but there will be other birthdays." Like her like verbally convincing herself that this is the right thing to do. I love the fact that it then goes into night vision, so it kind of like
adds to the creepiness.
adds to the creepiness, but also adds to the fact that like they might not have the best budget to do everything that they want, but it just feels authentic.
Mhm.
And how she tries to continue to deliver the information because it's like this
She
if
thinks maybe I'll get out of here. When as
yeah.
the audience, you're like, if you've gone that far into this situation, you're not getting
Or
out.
just being like, at the least, maybe someone will find the camera and I'd be able to explain what has happened.
I found myself having the most empathy for her out of any of the characters in any of the short films,
Yes.
where like it is the most tragic,
Mm-hmm.
and it is the one that, and I think it's because of Mike Flanagan's writing, is he acknowledges the tragedy of what's happening to this character, that this is horrifying and sad, and he doesn't try to make it into some, when you look at the first one, like Stork, which is crazy,
Yeah.
wild one. And so in that way, I think VHS Beyond does give you a variety of tones and styles. The abduction framing thing, that's what the movie ends on, and it felt like a really weird note to end on. Um, the the entire time, there's been a lot of just kind of rambling about UFO encounters, but there's been a refrain that refers to in the 1950s, there was a family of Chinese immigrants in Toronto. The family were well off, purchased a house that was built in the late Victorian era. In the 80s, the father and mother died. They left the house to the son, who puts it up for sale, and then he disappears, which I think might be the house from the original VHS movie, because in the
Okay.
first VHS movie, the dudes come across this house. I think some of them have some familiarity with it, and there's all these VHS tapes of weird shit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so they're giving some backstory to the man who owned that house that I think we see briefly in that film. So there is some like lore. Then they try to tie that into this whole alien concept. And the final sequence of this movie is two pieces of video footage, which is presented without comment, and the filmmakers cannot verify or vouch for its authenticity. And like, I just didn't understand what I was supposed to get from that.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're a hardcore fan of VHS, I'm supposed to be like, oh, now the thing makes sense from the like, but I'm not a hard. I watch
Yeah.
it because it's an anthology. Um, but yeah, weird, weird way to end it. And so after watching this, uh, I started to wonder which of these would you most want to see made into a full-length feature? Which do you think would work?
I think the stowaway one.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I think it would lose part of the tragedy. Or do you think we would meet her before she left her husband and kid, and we would go all the way back to that?
That, or it could be like someone found it and then they're trying to like get a puzzle as to what happened to her,
Nah,
or
I don't
like
like that. I don't like that. I reject it. We're not green light years. I think for me it's Stork. I think Stork has the most potential for a feature film because that's your finale. That's your last like 20 minutes is the short film. And the rest of it is just building atmosphere and mood about these babies being kidnapped. And like that, it made me think of Seven, where it's a city that never gets a name and it feels surreal.
Mhm.
And I think you do the same vibe there. Like I could see David Fincher making a version of Stork that was like fantastic. Um, but yeah. Another thing I wondered is this is a combination of two genres, found footage and anthologies.
Yeah.
Do either of these actually work as film genres? Can you say there's a found footage movie you've seen that you were like, that was fantastic, or
No.
that was an anthology film I loved? I can think of an anthology film I loved
What?
from this year.
What?
Kinds of Kindness.
Okay.
But I think it has to be an auteur-helmed. It has to be one vision from one person. That's when I think it works. Because you think about The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the Coen brothers.
Yeah.
It's a Western anthology, but they made every single one of those movies. I think when you have an anthology film with multiple voices involved, or like before I get that, the Wes Anderson short films that he made.
Yeah.
I think when you have multiple people, and it's more of like, other than, Kate Siegel and Mike Flanagan and Justin Long, it's people that we aren't necessarily that familiar with. They haven't done that much in the industry as far as I'm aware.
This is like a jumping point at some point.
You are getting something that's low quality.
Yeah, it's like an audition tape of sorts.
And so there are people that love watching that stuff. They like watching these sort of raw filmmakers figuring it out. For me, I'm just not really interested in that. I think we need more director-focused anthologies. I think that's something interesting. Can you think of a horror director you would give a horror anthology to?
Ari Aster would probably be.
That's the obvious one, Ariana. That's the obvious one. Zach Kreger.
Okay.
He's done sketch comedy with Whitest Kids You Know. He made one of the best horror movies I've ever seen, Barbarian.
And Barbarian did feel like it was sectioned off to a certain degree. Like there was.
They were interlocked stories. And so I think I would love to see Zach Kreger do a segment on a VHS film. I think that would be a fun thing. So would you recommend VHS Beyond to our audience? Yeah, it's one of those, like, if anything you heard intrigues you, then watch it. But if this sounds like something you would not enjoy, you're probably right. So I would pass it by. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to check our show notes for any important links, including to our website, popcult.blog. Make sure that you are subscribed to be notified when new episodes are up, wherever it is you listen to podcasts. If you visit popcult.blog right now, you're going to find a whole lot more reviews. We've been around for about 14 years, or 15 now, I think, maybe. October is made up of HorrorFest 2024, which will be wrapping up next week with 2 more reviews. Ken Russell's unhinged and amazing historical horror, The Devils, and the campy 80s horror flick, Motel Hell. And then November, we are going to be watching the films of a Italian director who I have been very curious to explore, Pier Paolo Pasolini. Some controversial films mixed in there. If you enjoy what we do here on the podcast and over on popcult.blog, we'd encourage you to support us on Patreon. We've got lots of different reward levels and things you unlock when you join us over there. I want to thank our current patrons, Becca and Matt. They donate at the writer's room level, which means they get to pick a movie every month for me to watch and review. Be watching one of those tonight, which sometimes they love to give me movies I don't want to see. One of those I saw earlier this week, which was Saw 3. I've never seen a Saw movie before, and that was quite a confusing one to jump into. And then tonight I'll be watching the Amazon original film Babes, which I am not looking forward to, but maybe I'll be delightfully surprised. No matter what level you join at over on the Patreon, you will get access to our patron-exclusive podcast. We've got 2 episodes up now of Love at First Laugh, which is our series looking at romantic comedies. And then I think in 2025, to kick off the new year, we're hopefully going to be able to do a series on a Japanese director that we've gotten very interested in lately. Well, our next episode of the Pop Cult Podcast is a long one. It's our Pop Cult Halloween Spooktacular. We'll be reviewing multiple things in this episode, including Gary Larson's Tales from the Far Side TV specials, the new short from Kiyoshi Kurosawa, director of Pulse, called Chime, the Disney film Hocus Pocus, and finishing things off with Addams Family Values. Well, until next time, you keep listening, we'll keep watching. Our podcast music was provided by thepodcasthost.com and Alitu, the podcast maker. Find your own free podcast music over at thepodcasthost.com/free music.